people were willing to fabricate additions to the texts. We have all these texts about what Jesus did. Some of them contradict each other, right? If I say that Anthony yesterday was in Italy and Dana says that Anthony was in New York yesterday, we can't both be right, right? One of us is making something up. Well, the copies of the scriptures that we have from that time period are so different. Some people had to be making them up. Some people were making stuff up. Fidelity to the tradition was not necessarily a prized principle.
I have a question.
Yep.
Do you think just in general, like you were just saying, people just randomly made stuff up, or do you think after it being like changed from person to person, it just got so bad that it was completely...
I think both. There's evidence for both. That sometimes you pass along things and they just change, right? If we played the telephone game in here, you guys know the telephone game, right? Aaron talks about that, where I say something to Lauren and Lauren says something to Carl, right? And we pass it along that way. By the time it gets to, what?
Fred.
Yeah, sorry, Fred. By the time it gets to Fred, it will probably have changed. Not because maybe we didn't intentionally change it, but it probably just will. There's evidence that that happened, but there's also evidence that people were intentionally fabricating stuff to change the stuff. We can't go back to the originals, right? We don't have the original Gospel of Mark. And in fact, Ehrman talks about the letter to the Galatians, which was probably written between 50 and 60. What's the oldest copy that we have? We don't have a copy that goes back to the year 50. The oldest copy we have goes back to when? Anybody remember? 200. The letter to the Galatians was written probably around 50 and copied over and over and over and over and over and over again. And around 200, we've got copies that go back to there. What happened between 200 and 50 to that text, we cannot tell. We don't know if fabrications were added, deleted. We just can't know. We cannot reconstruct what happened because the oldest text that we have goes back to 200. There could have been a lot of changes. Maybe there was no changes, but we don't know either way. We can speculate that there probably were some changes because there are changes with all this stuff. I want you guys in groups of 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 or whatever to come up with several examples of the types of changes that Ehrman talks about in Misquoting Jesus. Give me specific examples of some of the changes that were made. All right, so what were some of the examples that Ehrman gives of changes that were made? Dana?
I don't remember exactly what it was because I couldn't find it, but something along the lines like either the first or the last word was the same in 2 lines, so they would see one and then skip over the next one.
Yeah, they saw a line that started the same way, the blah 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 blah, continues on the rest, blah blah blah, but then the next line starts with the. They might see that and be like, oh, I already got that, so then they go down to this line, so they skip from there to there because they think, oh, I already wrote that sentence that starts with the. So they would skip lines. That's a kind of accidental, unintentional change, but kind of change they made. Another example. Jackie?
The only way to copy a book in the ancient world was to do it by hand, letter by letter. And if you made a mistake, you had to redo it.
They had to write it out by hand. They didn't have copy machines or anything. But that's not necessarily an example of a change that might have been made. Yeah.
Maybe intentional changes, like we were saying before, like make the text make sense, like so that it
was contradictory.
Do you have a specific example of one like that?
Yes, specifically, where is it? On page 94, where it talks about that they changed their text because they thought that the text contained like a factual error and they wanted it to make sense. So it says, this appears to be the case at the very beginning of Mark, where the author introduces his gospel by saying, just as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, behold, I am sending a messenger before your face, make straight his paths.
Yeah. So that passage, the text, the Gospel of Mark says, it starts out by saying, as the prophet Isaiah said, blah, 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 blah. But what's wrong with that? Isaiah doesn't say that. That's not in Isaiah. It's actually a combination of something from Exodus and something from Malachi. So it's not actually in Isaiah. So some of them changed it. So instead of saying Isaiah says, they say something like the prophets say, something more vague. So they were just correcting an erroneous citation. Good. Other examples, changes that they made. Dana?
It says, the scribe may have more than one manuscript at hand and can correct the mistake in one by reading it from the other one.
Right. If he's got two copies in front of him and they're different, he might go with one rather than the other, and he might even change one to fit the other. Of course, you wonder, like, how does the scribe know for sure which one to trust, right? We can know which text is older now because we have stuff like carbon dating, but the scribes back then, they didn't have carbon dating. How did they know which text was older and more reliable? Well, they probably made an educated guess. So it may or it may not have been right, but they made one manuscript fit with another manuscript says. Good. Yeah, Jen?
In the Codex,
Yeah.
where it's supposed to be Christ bears all things, but by the word of his power, but they end up changing the word bears to manifest.
Yeah, what page are you on?
56.
56, yeah. Basically, these two words are very similar to one another, Pharaon and Phaneron, and some people just misspell it. But it gives it a different meaning when they misspell it. It's a new word. Yeah, that was probably an accidental type of change made by someone who's writing too quickly and not looking close at what they were reading. What else? Somebody who hasn't shared. I'll take this moment to remind you that discussion and participation is part of your grade in the course, so if you're not talking much, you might want to talk. Other examples?
Did someone say in Luke 12, 8 to 9 one?
Tell me about Luke 12, 8 to 9.
Well,
What page are you on?
92.
92.
The earliest papyrus manuscript, manuscript of the passage leaves off all of verse 9. Scribe copies for the angels of God. Verse 8, and when his eyes turned to the page, he picked up the same words. And verse 9, I assume those were the words just copied.
Yeah, we said that before, like their eyes see, oh, thee, I already did thee, and they drop down a line. That's one specific example of where they skipped a line because they thought they had already written it. Yeah.
The story of Jesus and the woman taken in adultery, it says the account is found in only one passage of the New Testament, in John 7:53-12, and it appears to have not have been originally there.
Yeah, that's only in late manuscripts. Somebody fabricated that and put it in at some point in time because none of the older texts have that story or any version of that story. It's only in these later versions of the Gospel of John that included that. So it appears to have been a fabrication that was added later on. However, after that was inserted, all the later copies got that, right?